I can't stand my mother-in-law. She's such a horrible person. She doesn't like me because of my skin color. And you know what she's saying about my soon-to-be-born babies? What does she have to say about her grandbabies, let me tell you?
Where do I start with this? I always knew all my mother-in-law's craps would eventually build up to some huge giant event that would see everyone turn on her. She was just the type of person who kept up with the microaggressions. It was why we kept our distance from her in the first place. I'll start by saying that I grew up with working-class parents who eventually worked their way up to the middle class. When we moved into a suburban neighborhood, I was about 8 years old. There were only about 2 other POC families. This mattered to my parents because we were black. Everyone else in the neighborhood was white. But to our relief, everyone accepted us with open arms, and I spent the next few years going to school and getting great grades. When I was getting ready to enter high school, it was suggested I skip 2 grades because they felt the material would be more challenging for me. While I was nervous to just automatically skip 2 grades, I realized I wanted to do it. I loved to learn and did not want to coast through the 9th and 10th grades when I could go straight to junior year. My parents weren't on board right away. It took some convincing, but eventually they agreed to let me start high school in the 11th grade. It was there that I met Thomas. He was 2 years older than me, but since I was in his grade, we were in the same classes. Where I was on the quiet side, he was quite outgoing. Yet they do say opposites attract, and after a group project, we started hanging out more and more. Eventually, we started dating. The 2 of us did not tell our parents until half a year into the relationship. My parents were weary because of the age difference, but decided to give Thomas a chance. Now, Thomas's father was very welcoming and embraced me into the family, but his mother, not so much. Jackie did not like me from the get-go. It wasn't my age. Through our conversations, I was able to figure out she disliked me because I was black. She didn't come right out and say it or anything like that. It was through subtle, ignorant comments she made towards me that signified Jackie did not like me because of my skin. However, Jackie wasn't going to get rid of me that easily. I cared for Thomas and wanted to be with him. Even though we were young, we knew that we wanted each other. The 2 of us were dating when we graduated high school, and we decided that we wanted to go to school. I wanted to work with numbers, which was why I figured a bachelor's degree in accounting would be the best option for me. Thomas went to a trade school, learning a trade that would give him a very good job along with benefits inside the future. Well, the school I went to was local, so Thomas and I did not have to shift to a long-distance relationship, and we continued to date, and in my final year of college, when I was 19 and Thomas was 21, I discovered I was pregnant. Thomas and I already knew that we wanted to get married and have kids shortly. This was a little too soon, and when I first found out, I was terrified. However, after we talked about it, we first decided to elope and go forward with the pregnancy. I was nervous about telling my parents, but they were thrilled. My now father-in-law was also happy, but I'll say my mother-in-law, she put on her fake little smile. Though I knew she was less than pleased with the news. A part of me figured Jackie always hoped that dating me was a phase and Thomas would eventually start dating, quote, the right kind of girl. The 2 of us eventually did have a wedding ceremony, so all of our parents could attend. It was a small affair with just family and friends in the backyard of Thomas's aunt's house. She had a big backyard, so it was the perfect setting to have the ceremony and an after-party. Even though we were already married, and mother-in-law had to accept it, she acted up at the wedding. My mother-in-law wore a dress that was off-white, as she said and made little comments. I swear at one point she even tried to dump wine on my dress, but decided against it at the last second. I might have imagined it, but I would not put it past my mother-in-law to do that to me. She wanted to do whatever she could to make my life as unforgettable as possible, because her son was not marrying a white type of girl. No, this wasn't a slip-up. I meant what I said there. She wanted him to marry a white girl. That was the right girl for Thomas, not me, according to her. With us getting married and having kids, I was tied to Thomas's life and technically her life forever. At least regarding the pregnancy, I was. Something could have happened between Thomas and me, and we could have ended up getting a divorce. I mean, life happens. Nobody can predict the future. However, when you have children, you're tied to the other person you have the children with for the rest of your days. Jackie was not happy about that at all, but she dealt with it in her own little way. Meaning Jackie kept up with her comments. They were racist when you read between the lines, but she never outright said anything that could be perceived as racist. The first time she did was when the twins were getting close to their due date. I overheard Jackie talking to my husband Thomas about how dark the kids might actually turn out to be. Thomas shut it down right away, and he told his mother that she was being ignorant and said another comment like, that would see her not being a part of her grandchildren's lives for a while. The twins ended up coming into the world about a week after my graduation. I was so grateful I was able to graduate before having the twins because I wanted to walk across the stage to get my degree. It wasn't the easiest labor. After the kids were born, the twins had to stay in the hospital for a little while because they were small. While they were in the hospital, Thomas and I went back to his grandmother's house, where we had been staying since it was discovered that we were pregnant. She had graciously offered to let us stay there a few months back, and Thomas's paternal grandmother wanted us to be able to save up while not having to worry about having a place to stay. It was such a nice offer. Thomas and I accepted right away. Thomas's grandmother was exactly like her son, my father-in-law. She was so sweet and accepting, sometimes I wondered why father-in-law and mother-in-law were even married. There were rumors that it was mostly because she ended up pregnant, but I wasn't going to poke around in the past when it was important to focus on the future. Whatever the reason, father-in-law stayed with mother-in-law and did seem to care about her. When she made these comments, he would just brush her off or ignore her. He would attempt to give the kids extra love so it would not come off like their grandmother held some prejudice towards them. I appreciated it. But the best way to shield the kids was to keep them away from their grandma. From the start, we did let Jackie interact with the twins a bit. Alexi and Lex loved both pair of grandparents, and we were careful to always be present when Jackie was with the twins because the last thing I wanted was a racist issue or some crap to come out of her mouth. They would eventually come to realize that people were going to judge them for the color of their skin. Unfortunately, you tended to learn this at an early age, and I didn't want my kids to have to learn this from their own grandmother, of all people. Once my kids were old enough, I began to see how bright they really were. They were showing signs that they were very young, of course, but once they started school, it became crystal clear. By the time the kids were starting preschool, I had a distant relationship with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had started babysitting my niece's daughter, who she treated as her granddaughter. It was only a temporary thing, but she gushed over her, and father-in-law loved the niece, but thought mother-in-law was overstepping her boundaries. Why gush over her great niece when she had two perfectly lovely grandchildren of her own? Well, that great niece was white, unlike my children. Alexi and Lex were biracial, but they did look more like me than their father. I know it made mother-in-law mad to no end, so if she wanted to ignore my kids, I was fine ignoring her. This wasn't to say she didn't spend time with my kids, though. Well, Jackie did, but she hated that she could not be alone with them. Probably to influence them with whatever racist bullcrap she wanted to utter into their ears. At least Alexi and Lex had my parents. They adored their grandkids and spoiled them to no end. I knew that when I got with Thomas and my mother-in-law, she was not going to make it easy for us. This was just a fact, and the reason why I stuck it with is because I loved my husband and the family that we've made. It would be by no means easy. Thomas sometimes felt torn between me and his mother, but when it came down to it, he chose me. The two of us had a family together. Why wouldn't he defend me? The older the kids got, the more difficult it was to explain the strained relationship. When they turned 5, my mother-in-law suddenly got a new interest in them, but this was because her great niece was now in school full-time. Her babysitting services were not needed. Alexi and Lex did seem happy their grandmother was suddenly interested in them. I didn't think my mother-in-law had changed, but father-in-law was always with her while she saw after the kids, so you know what? I wasn't really worried. My father-in-law would never let anything happen to my kids. He loved those children more than anything, and Once the kids were there in the 3rd grade, we ended up considering putting them in a gifted school. The principal even recommended it. I talked it over with my husband, and eventually we decided it was a good idea for them to go to the gifted school. They will start the next school year. So let's jump ahead 2 grades, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. So my kids being able to get this gifted school was going to be great for them. Like my parents, Thomas was a little hesitant, but the more we talked about it, the more he realized it was a great idea. Watching the kids grow was amazing, but also made me a little sad because it seemed to be happening so fast. During their 8th year, they were doing even better in school. I would not be surprised if they skipped a grade or 2 like I did. We didn't tell anyone yet that the kids were going to a gifted school, but planned to during the holiday season. The reason I'm posting this is unfortunately not to brag about my kids, but because of what my mother-in-law ended up doing this year during Christmas. When you're in the Christmas season, you expect everything to be going lovely and about family. My mother-in-law had not done anything especially bad, so I had no reason to think something was going to happen. It started as a normal day. Mother-in-law and father-in-law were supposed to come over for Christmas Eve with some presents, and they would open the in-laws' presents, spend time with them, and then go home. How could anyone think that anything was going to end up going wrong? When they got there, I noticed that they weren't having any gifts. I was a little puzzled, but decided not to say anything about it. They might just be in the car or something. So we chatted in the hallway and then had the dinner that I prepared. The presents left my mind, and it wasn't until after dinner when the kids started excitedly asking about their gifts that I realized they still hadn't gotten out the presents. I was very confused because I didn't get why they hadn't brought the presents. We decided to give the kids cash this year, father-in-law said quickly, cutting off mother-in-law who was about to explain. Well, I frowned and said, well, that's fine, and they can pick out what they want at least. It was strange for them to go this route, but I figured maybe there was some mishap at the last minute, so the in-laws decided just to give us cash. Usually you give cash to older kids, but like I said, I was willing to roll with it. When it came down to it, I was pretty easygoing and willing to accept things for how they were. Yes, mother-in-law added, and there's something more where that came from. We just came into some money because my estranged father left me with some in his will. I remember hearing about that, but did not really understand what this had to do with giving money for a Christmas gift. Certainly they had the money to purchase actual gifts, tangible gifts for the children. Well, I appreciate it, but we're fine, I reassured her. By now, we all had our single-family home. It was perfect for us, and we were not in really a lot of debt. I mean, I got a scholarship, so I didn't have student loan debts or anything. Yes, well, Alexi and Lex are going to need us to contribute as much as we can so they don't end up as one of those hoodlums. The moment this came out of my mother-in-law's mouth, my soul absolutely left my body. Thomas came into the room to ask why I looked like I saw a ghost. I told Thomas what mother-in-law said, and you know what? She admitted it. Father-in-law looked ashamed, and he explained that he was sorry for what she had said. I told him it's fine, but they both have to leave. Mother-in-law starts saying she didn't mean anything by it, and she just wanted to make sure her grandbabies did not turn out like some of my family members. I was seconds from cursing her out, but Thomas jumped in and told him that they had to leave, so they left. Thank goodness the kids didn't hear anything. This was Christmas. They were supposed to have a nice, loving holiday with their grandparents, and it turned into a crap show. It wasn't fair. Thomas and I tried to make sure the rest of the day was good for Lex and Alexi. They were told that their grandparents were sick and had to go rest, and because they're kids, they accepted it without giving it much thought. I don't know what's going to happen with my in-laws now, but I can tell you it's not going to go back to how it was. Update number 1. We did not speak to mother-in-law or father-in-law until the day after Christmas. Thomas said that he was going to go over to their house to speak with them and asked if I wanted to go. I told him that I also wanted to go because I had a few things to get off my chest. When we get there, father-in-law was the one to open the door. He apologized right away and said mother-in-law was out of line. I asked where she was, and he said that she would be home soon, and while we waited, Thomas told his father the good news about the kids. They're going to a gifted school because of how well that they're doing academically, and He didn't really look shocked and said that he figured the kids would go far. The reason for this, they had their mother's smarts. I didn't think he was trying to butter me up. I genuinely think he meant it. Around this time, mother-in-law came scrolling back in, and she looked shocked to see us. Thomas started first, saying that she needs to apologize for what she had said and done. But Jackie, being Jackie, refused. Why apologize when she's just trying to make sure her grandbabies did not become another statistic? If they did not put up the money, then there's no way those kids could make it. Intelligence isn't their point. All of us knew what she was saying, and before either of us could say something, father-in-law suddenly burst out laughing. Jackie, don't be stupid. Alexi and Lex just got into a gifted school. Those kids aren't going to need any help from us. Do you know why? Because they're smart as hell. My mother-in-law starts shrieking and then stormed out, and I burst out in laughter too. Despite myself, it was nice to see my father-in-law defend us. But I never thought he would defend us in such a manner. The two of us stayed there a little longer just to talk with our father-in-law. Eventually we left and headed back home, feeling a lot better than I had since the confrontation on Christmas Eve. Let Jackie feel completely stupid. She was the one who let her racism get to her, so she had no one to blame but herself. Update number 2. It's been about 2 weeks since the whole blow-up at Christmas happened, and if you don't recall what happened, my mother-in-law assumed her half-black grandkids were going to end up as hoodlums because of my heritage. We ended up confronting them the day after Christmas, and while we waited for mother-in-law, we told father-in-law the kids were enrolling in a gifted school. When mother-in-law came in, we told her after she doubled down and refused to apologize. Father-in-law laughed at her for her stupidity, and the two of us left after that and have not seen mother-in-law since. However, father-in-law has come by and kept in frequent contact with us. One night he showed up, a suitcase in hand. I was surprised and asked him what's wrong. Mother-in-law and father-in-law got into a fight about how mother-in-law treated the kids. He said that he can no longer take how she treated Alexi and Lex. They were her grandbabies. She still should not hold that racist attitude. It was a huge fight that ended up with father-in-law saying that he needed a few days away from her. This was why he came here. I wondered why he did not go stay with his mother, but figured he would rather be surrounded by his son and grandkids. Thomas and I talked it over, deciding that we would let him stay. He needs his family right now. Mother-in-law had to be raging over this. I did not receive any calls or texts from her, much to my relief at least. But the silence was also a little concerning because this woman was never very quiet. She loved to blast her business to anyone who listened, including online. And after about 2 days, mother-in-law finally called father-in-law and asked when he was going to come home. He asked her if she was going to realize that how she had been acting for the past year was not good. It was racist behavior and Jackie needed to apologize for it. If you think that mother-in-law did not play ball, you're right. She told him that some differences were just built into people. Certain races were better at some things, and there was not much you could do about it. This was probably the most explicit racist thing my mother-in-law had ever said. It's just so blatant. How did she not think she did anything wrong? I just knew that now I was done trying to have some sort of relationship with her. Thomas was done too. We discussed it the other day and decided his mother was just not going to be in our lives anymore. It seemed like father-in-law was reconsidering his marriage as well. At least it appeared that way. I had no idea if he was considering divorce, and he might be holding out hope that he might be able to get through to Jackie somehow. It was pointless, but that was his wife. So I stayed quiet about it because I didn't want to make father-in-law too upset right now. Like I said, the ball is in mother-in-law's court. I doubt she's going to rein in her comments anyways, and have a feeling that she might even get worse with her racist behavior. Update number 3. Hey guys, father-in-law's still with us. It's been about 3 weeks since he moved into the spare room, and honestly, it's been nice having him around. The kids are thrilled at their granddad. He wakes them up, and every day they come home together from school. He's been a huge help to us as well, and both of us work outside of the home, and it gives my parents a break from having to pick up the kids all the time. Father-in-law's retired, so he has a lot of free time than my parents, who are both still working. Not to say my parents still won't see the kids, it just gives them some more free time. It was around the 4th week since father-in-law came to stay with us when mother-in-law decided to do her most racist action yet. She had the balls to go on Facebook and start ranting about her dirty daughter-in-law. Then she brought up my kids, who were also sullied because of their mom, apparently. Obviously, I'm leaving out a lot of colorful phrases that my mother-in-law used. She also put a lot of slurs into the post, much to my shock. Thomas was the one who brought it to my attention. He got a message from one of his cousins on Facebook who says it's important he checks out his recent post from his mom. I cannot believe what I was seeing. Naturally, I reported the post, but not before letting father-in-law see it. It's difficult to do this because I think a part of him was still holding out hope that his wife might just see the error in her ways. With this post, it's crystal clear Jackie was never going to see the error of her ways. It wasn't long after that my father-in-law said he's going to start looking into a divorce. Thomas and I were both shocked. I mean, look, this man always seemed to stand by his wife and just hope for the best. Even if they married because of a pregnancy, which was his wife, I get it. Privately, I told Thomas that it's about time that his father got his head on straight and left mother-in-law for good. This was only going to increase in her erratic behavior. I thank God that my kids were very young and were not on social media. They would not be exposed to my mother-in-law's racist behavior and never feel like they were less than me. Those kids were as soon as any other kid they passed on the street, saw at school, or spoke with. One day, they would ask questions about why grandfather was no longer with grandma. They would ask also why grandma did not come around as much anymore. These were important questions, and Thomas and I were going to have to answer. I was fully prepared to answer them once they were old enough. For now, they could at least remain in ignorant bliss.
So, I saw some interesting conversations down below in the comments section of the original post, pointing out that the grandfather was partially to blame for why the grandmother was so racist and toxic, because he must have been enabling her all these years by not putting an end to it and saying, you know what, if you're going to act like this, I'm not going to stay with you. Well, at the end of the story, we find out Grandpa eventually did reach his breaking point, so there were some other commenters saying, you know what, I don't really blame the Grandpa. He was in love with this girl. He loved her for a long time. They've been married forever. It's not just easy to up and leave someone, but he still had the confidence to do it. So I want to know what you guys think of it. Let's talk about it down below in the comments section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day. If you guys want to be a part of these daily stories, consider subscribing to the channel. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. And of course, remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.